He stood on a stage of black marble, bathed in a spotlight, holding a glass of Bollinger champagne. This was Dante Russo's coronation. He had won the divorce, he had won the $100 million, and he had won the narrative. He smirked at the Vogue editors in the front row, a picture of triumph. He raised his glass to toast his new fashion empire, built on the ashes of his cold, controlling marriage. Then the giant screens behind him flickered. The music died, and the face of his ex-mother-in-law billionaire CEO Madeleine Hayes appeared. She wasn't there to congratulate him. She was there to execute him. The world first came to know Dante Russo through the lens of a paparazzi camera on a beach in St. Bart's. He was all sharp angles and sun-kissed olive skin, his arm draped possessively around Serafina Hayes. The headlines were brutal billionaire wallflower snares, Italian stallion. Serafina Hayes was the antithesis of her name. In a family of fire-breathing corporate titans, she was quiet earth. She was the sole heir to the Aura Tech global fortune, a $50 billion empire built by her mother, Madeleine. But while Madeleine dominated Bloomberg terminals, Serafina haunted museums and funded archaeological digs. She was kind, brilliant, and in the eyes of the society pages, hopelessly plain. Dante was not. Dante was a masterpiece of Milanese genetics, a struggling model who understood his true currency was not on a runway, but in the private salons of the ultra-rich. He met Serafina at a fundraiser she was hosting for the preservation of Venetian art. He hadn't known a single thing about the art, but he spoke passionately about the soul of the canals, his dark eyes fixed on hers. She was charmed. He was efficient. Their marriage, 6 months later, was the event of the season, a $10 million affair at the family's Newport estate. Madeleine Hayes watched the proceedings from the front row, her face an unreadable mask of polite neutrality. She had run a full background check on Dante, of course. It was clean, almost suspiciously so. No criminal record, no debts, just a string of wealthy older patrons. He was, in her professional opinion, a high-functioning parasite. But Serafina, for the first time in her life, had been defiant. She was in love. Let her be in love, Madeleine, her own lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, had advised. Just make sure the prenup is ironclad. The prenup was a fortress. Dante Russo signed it with a flourish, his smile never wavering. He knew a fortress could be sieged. Life as Mr. Serafina Hayes was for a time perfect. Dante became a lifestyle influencer. His Instagram, once a sparse collection of headshots, exploded. He was Dante Russo, reclining on a yacht off the Amalfi coast. Dante Russo front row at Paris Fashion Week. Dante Russo curating a dinner party in their $40 million Fifth Avenue penthouse. He didn't just wear the clothes Serafina's money bought. He personified a life that millions envied. He was charismatic, charming, and utterly devoted in public. She is my muse, he'd tell Vanity Fair, my anchor in a world of shallow beauty. Behind the scenes, the performance was exhausting. Sarah darling, he'd say, scrolling through his feed, this botany thing you're funding, it's not sexy. No one cares about Amazonian fungi. Serafina would look up from her research, her brow furrowed. It's not supposed to be sexy, Dante. It's a key compound for a new anti-malarial drug. But the optics, my love, he'd sigh as if explaining a complex theory. We need to be at the Met Gala, not digging in the mud. We need to be a brand. Serafina was a brand. The Serafina Foundation was one of the most respected philanthropic organizations in the world. It built schools, funded medical research, and operated with quiet, ruthless efficiency, a trait she had inherited from her mother. Dante, meanwhile, felt the gilded cage tightening. He was an accessory, a beautiful, expensive, and ultimately powerless Fabergé egg. The prenup was absolute. In the event of a divorce, he would receive a one-time payment of $1 million for every year of marriage, capped at 5 years. A pittance. He was determined to change the terms of the deal one way or another. He began his campaign subtly. He started to advise Serafina on her foundation's investments. "This PR firm you use is ancient," he said one evening, swirling a $1,000 bottle of Chateau Margaux. "They don't understand social capital. You need someone aggressive, someone who can place you." He introduced her to Bianca Wells. Bianca was a shark in Chanel, a PR maestro who specialized in reputational management. She was all teeth and compliments. Serafina disliked her instantly, but Dante was insistent. "Just a consultation, my love. For me." Serafina, ever the peacemaker, agreed. This was the first and most critical mistake. Bianca Wells didn't work for Serafina. She worked for Dante. And through her, Dante began to meet people. Not just influencers, but bankers, private equity types, men who understood that lifestyle was just another asset class. He began to build a world separate from his wife. He started having business lunches that lasted until cocktail hour. He spoke of synergy and vertical integration. He was building a case. And Serafina, busy funding a new water treatment facility in Peru, was too preoccupied to see the scaffolding being erected for her own downfall. The true fracture came at a tense family dinner. It was just the three of them, Dante, Serafina, and Madeline, in the Hayes' starkly modern dining room overlooking Central Park. Dante cleared his throat. "Madeline, Sarah, I've been working on a project. A new venture." He slid a glossy, leather-bound proposal across the table. On the cover, a single stylized R. "Rus Esso," he announced. "A lifestyle brand. Fashion. Hospitality. A new members-only club in Soho. It's time to leverage the Hayes Russo name." Serafina stared at the proposal. "Dante, this looks like it cost $50,000 to print." "You have to spend money to make money, darling," he smiled. "I'm projecting a $200 million valuation in 3 years. I just need the seed capital. $50 million. There was a long silence, broken only by the chime of the grandfather clock. Madeline Hayes placed her fork down. She hadn't even opened the binder. "No," she said. Dante's smile twitched. "I'm sorry." "No. Auratech Global does not invest in vanity projects. And the Hayes name," she said, her voice dropping a degree, "is not a brand to be leveraged by a club. It's a global leader in biometric security and quantum computing." "This isn't your decision, Madeline." Dante snapped his mask, slipping. "This is my life. Our life." He turned to his wife. "Sarah, tell her." Serafina looked at the R logo. She thought of the $50 million she was trying to raise for her Peruvian project. "Dante," she said softly. "I can't. The foundation needs that. People's lives depend on that." Dante stared at her. The two women, mother and daughter, are united front of cold, hard no. He saw it then. He would always be the outsider, the court jester. He threw his napkin on the table. "You," he pointed at Madeline. "You've been poisoning her against me from day one." He turned to Serafina, his voice dropping into a tone of deep theatrical hurt. "And you're just a coward. You'd rather stay a boring little librarian under her thumb than be a queen with me." He stormed out. That night he didn't come home. The next morning, Page 6 had an exclusive. Dante Russo moves out of penthouse. I need to breathe, says model husband. The war had begun. The divorce was not a legal proceeding. It was a PR war, and Dante Russo had hired the best general. Bianca Wells mobilized her network with terrifying speed. The narrative she crafted was a masterpiece of victimhood. Dante wasn't a gold digger. He was a creative soul suffocated by old money. Serafina wasn't a philanthropist. She was a cold, passionless woman manipulated by her tyrannical mother. Madeleine Hayes wasn't a CEO. She was a dragon guarding a treasure she didn't deserve. Dante is devastated, Bianca told People magazine in an exclusive interview. He tried for 2 years to build a real life with Serafina, to bring joy and passion to that mausoleum of a family. But they don't just want your love. They want your soul. The leaks were constant and strategic. Paparazzi whom Bianca had on retainer caught Dante looking forlorn outside a rented Soho loft, carrying a single artfully distressed leather duffel bag. He was photographed seeking solace with other models, beautiful, sympathetic women who would pat his arm as he bravely told his story over Negronis at Carbone. Dante himself gave a masterful performance. He was booked on The Dialogue, the podcast de rigueur for celebrities wanting to launder their reputations. It was suffocating. Dante said, his voice a perfect husky blend of sadness and strength. You know, people see the money, the houses. They don't see the isolation. I proposed a business, a way for us to build something together, something of our own. And they treated me like the help. The podcast host, a woman known for her pseudo-intellectual takedowns, was putty in his hands. So you were creatively suppressed. Dante laughed, a hollow, tragic sound. I was erased. I was a walking, talking handbag. I finally had to make a choice. Do I die there a beautiful decoration? Or do I leave with nothing but my integrity and try to build something real? Nothing but his integrity became the rallying cry. A #FreeDante hashtag trended for a full 48 hours. He was the modern man, a creative force being crushed by an archaic matriarchy. While Dante played the public martyr, his legal team, also guided by Bianca, launched a brutal private assault. They contested the pre-nup. The document is unconscionable, his lawyer argued in a closed-door mediation. Mr. Russo was coerced. He was young in love and manipulated by a family with legal resources 1,000 times his own. Madeleine's lawyer, Arthur Kincaid, a stoic man who had been with the family for 40 years, was unfazed. Your client signed it counselor. He was advised by his own counsel, whom I recall we paid for at his request. But Dante's team had a surprise. They weren't just arguing coercion. They were arguing fraud. My client, his lawyer announced, was promised a true partnership. Instead, he was systematically excluded from marital assets. Furthermore, and here he produced a stack of documents, we have found evidence of financial impropriety within the Serafina Foundation. Serafina, sitting next to Kincaid, felt the blood drain from her face. What my client in his advisory role discovered a series of irregular transfers, funds moving from the Foundation's general account to a shell corporation, Nautilus Holdings, based in the Cayman Islands, a total of $12 million unaccounted for. Serafina was speechless. She looked at the documents. They were real. Her signature, or a very good forgery, was on the transfers. Mr. Russo was so distressed by this, the lawyer continued, his voice slick with faux sympathy, that he confronted his wife. She told him to mind his own business, fearing for his own legal exposure and heartbroken by this betrayal of the public trust. He felt he had no choice but to leave. It was a brilliant move. Dante wasn't just a victim of a cold marriage. He was a whistleblower. Serafina was reeling. "Arthur, I don't know what this is. I never—" Kincaid put a hand on her arm. "Be quiet," he whispered. Madeline Hayes, who was conferencing in, spoke for the first time. Her voice was pure ice. "You are accusing my daughter of embezzlement." "The documents speak for themselves," Dante's lawyer said. "My client naturally wants to avoid a public scandal. He is prepared to sign a very comprehensive NDA and let this unfortunate matter go away, in exchange for a fair, revised settlement. Let's say $100 million. It was extortion dressed up as a divorce. "Get out," Kincaid said. "You have 24 hours. Dante's lawyer smiled. "Before we are forced to discuss this with the DA and the New York Times." When they were gone, Serafina broke. "Mother, I swear, I never— How is this possible?" Madeline was silent. She was looking at the Nautilus Holdings document. She recognized the typeface, the specific formatting of the wire instructions. She had seen it before. "Arthur," she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. "Cancel my meetings. Get me our forensic team. Get me everything on Dante Russo. Every text, every email, every bar tab. I want to know what brand of toothpaste he used for the last 2 years. She turned to her daughter, whose face was ashen. "Serafina," she said. It was not a question. "Did you know about this?" Serafina hesitated. She looked at the floor. I saw an email from our bank in Zurich about a Nautilus account a few months ago. I asked Dante about it. He said it was a discreet account for a new high-risk, high-reward donation. He said he was handling it to surprise me with the returns. He had me sign some papers. He said they were just standard tax forms. The naivety of it hung in the air, thick and poisonous. She had been so desperate for him to be a partner. She had walked right into his trap. Madeline closed her eyes. She had built an empire by anticipating every move, every threat. And the most significant threat had been sleeping in her daughter's bed. "This is no longer a divorce, Arthur," Madeline said, opening her eyes. "This is a war, and he has just given me the justification to use a nuclear weapon." But for now they were trapped. A public trial would decimate the Foundation's reputation, even if they were innocent. The DA would launch an investigation. The scandal would be the only thing anyone remembered. "Pay him," Madeline said, the words tasting like acid. "Madame Tuchel," Kincaid was shocked. "Pay him. The 100 million, draw it from the legacy trust my father set up, the one I can't touch. Let him have his victory. Let him believe he has won." "Mother, no," Serafina cried. "Serafina," Madeline said, "when you are fighting a monster, you do not wrestle it in the mud. You let it gorge itself on the bait, and you wait for it to wander into the trap." The settlement was signed. Dante Russo was $100 million richer. The media went insane. He had done it. He had cracked the uncrackable Hayes family. Bianca Wells's PR statement was a masterpiece of magnanimity. "Mr. Russo is pleased to put this painful chapter behind him. He wishes Ms. Hayes nothing but the best and will be making a significant anonymous donation to a charitable cause. Dante Russo, the whistleblower, the victim, the man of integrity had won, and he couldn't wait to tell the world. Victory was intoxicating. Dante felt reborn. The $100 million wasn't just money. It was a scorecard. It was validation. He had faced the haze dragon in her lair and walked away with a significant portion of the hoard. He woke up in his Soho loft the morning after the settlement wired, and the sunlight hitting the exposed brick felt different. It felt earned. His first call was to Bianca Wells. "We did it, mia cara," he said, stretching like a panther. "You did it, Dante," she cooed. "You played the part beautifully. Now phase 2, the reinvention." Phase 1 was purging. He returned every gift Serafina had ever given him, the Patek Philippe, the vintage Aston Martin, the custom-made suits, in a very public display. A Page 6 photographer just happened to be there as a bonded messenger service loaded boxes outside the Fifth Avenue penthouse. The headline, "Dante's Declaration, Rousseau returns golden handcuffs." He didn't, of course, return the $100 million. Phase 2 was the flaunting. He flew himself and a close circle of new, ridiculously beautiful friends to St. Bart's on a private Gulfstream G650. The models Irina and Katia were draped over him in every photo he posted. The captions were all about freedom, authenticity, and living my truth. He was photographed in Saint-Tropez, driving a newly purchased white McLaren, the license plate a custom Rousseau 1. He was at the Monaco Grand Prix, a regular on the yacht of a Russian oligarch. The press, fanned by Bianca, ate it up. He wasn't just a rich divorcee. He was a mogul in the making. GQ ran a fawning profile. From muse to mogul, Dante Rousseau steps out of the shadows. The article was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Sitting in the lobby of the Hôtel de Paris, the writer gushed, Dante Rousseau is the picture of relaxed power. He sips an espresso, not a hair out of place. For a long time, he says, his voice a low melodic baritone, I was defined by who I was with. I was an accessory. He leans in a conspiratorial glint in his eye. But an accessory is just a beautiful object. I am a creator. I had to fight for my freedom, and now I'm going to use it to build something that lasts. The article detailed his vision for the Rue SSO brand. It wasn't just a fashion line. It was a philosophy. It was unapologetic luxury. The crown jewel of this new empire was the flagship store. He had secured a 10,000 square foot space in a historic Soho cast-iron building, the one he had coveted for years. The lease alone was astronomical. He's burning through that settlement, Arthur Kincaid noted dryly to Madeline, presenting a weekly report. Let him, Madeline replied, not looking up from a quarterly report on Aura Tech's satellite division. Give a fool enough rope, Arthur. Dante wasn't just burning the settlement. He was leveraging it. He was now a man with $100 million in liquid assets. He was, for the first time, bankable on his own. He walked into a meeting with a high-powered private equity firm, West Third Capital, and pitched his Rue SSO brand. He was electric. He was the brand. He had the looks, the followers, the media narrative, and most importantly, the skin in the game, with his own $25 million commitment. West Third Capital, known for its aggressive plays in the luxury market, was impressed. They agreed to a $75 million seed round. Dante was ecstatic. He now had $175 million on paper to build his empire. He hadn't just beaten the Hayes family. He was about to supplant them. He was going to be the new name in New York luxury. He began the build-out of the Soho store, a monument to his own ego. It was all black marble, smoked glass and polished brass. A giant 4K video wall was installed, intended to play a loop of his lifestyle campaign shot in Milan. He poached the best staff from Tom Ford and Gucci. He planned the launch party. It would be the event of the fashion calendar, a statement of his arrival. The invitations were thick black cards delivered by hand. Vogue was confirmed. The New York Times Styles section was coming. A-list celebrities were promised. Bianca Wells was a whirlwind of activity. "This isn't a store opening, Dante," she told him, checking swatches. "This is your coronation. By the time this night is over, no one will even remember the name Serafina Hayes. You will be the story." He loved the sound of that. As the date approached, his arrogance swelled to operatic proportions. He started to believe his own PR. He was the creative genius. He was the victim who had bravely escaped. The $12 million he had siphoned from Serafina's foundation, the act that had bought his freedom, was a distant memory, a minor bit of smart accounting. He had framed her, yes, but hadn't she deserved it? She and her mother so cold, so superior. They thought he was stupid. They thought he was just a face. He looked at his own face in the mirror of his new sprawling bathroom, the face that had launched 100 headlines, the face that was now worth 9 figures. "You're not just a face, mio Dio," he whispered to his reflection. "You are an empire." He was so busy admiring his reflection that he never saw the shadow in the corner. He was so focused on the party, the cameras and the adulation, that he never once stopped to ask the most important question. Why in all these months had Madeleine Hayes said nothing? He mistook her silence for defeat. He mistook her stillness for surrender. He had never been on a safari, had never seen how a lioness hunts. She doesn't chase. She doesn't roar. She waits utterly still for the prey to become so drunk on its own freedom that it wanders right up to her, offering its throat. And Dante Russo was practically skipping toward the kill zone. While Dante Russo was painting the town red, Serafina Hayes was in a self-imposed exile at the family's stark, beautiful compound in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. She had not handled the divorce well. She wasn't just heartbroken. She was humiliated. She had been played not just by a man she loved, but by her own naivety. The Nautilus Holdings fraud, the $12 million he had stolen by tricking her into signing the transfers, was a wound that festered. It wasn't the money. It was the violation. He had used her trust, her work, as a weapon against her. She spent her days on long, punishing hikes, trying to sweat out the shame. She had stopped painting. What was the point? Her whole life had been a forgery. "He's on GQ," she said one evening, her voice flat, holding up her phone to show her mother who had flown in for the night. Madeleine glanced at the cover, Dante, in a velvet blazer, smirking. "It's a magazine, Serafina. It's designed to be thrown away." "He's winning, Mother. He's being celebrated for destroying me. And you paid him." The accusation hung in the crisp mountain air. "Yes," Madeleine said, sipping her tea. "I did. Why didn't you fight? You're Madeleine Hayes. You don't lose. You don't settle." "The foundation was at risk," Madeleine said, using the same logical tone. "A public fight would have jeopardized its charter." "The DA. I don't care about the DA." Serafina exploded, the first spark of her old fire returning. "I care that the man who stole from us, who framed me, is being called a mogul. He's using our money, my money, to build a temple to himself." Madeleine regarded her daughter. The pale, quiet girl was gone. In her place was an angry, wounded woman. Good, Madeline thought. Anger is a motivator. Grief is a boat anchor. You think I paid him, Madeline said, and that was the end of it. Wasn't it? Serafina, you run a global foundation. What is the first rule of crisis management? Serafina sighed. Control the narrative. No, Madeline said. That's PR. That's what Bianca Wells does. What is the first rule of power? Serafina was silent. You never, ever fight a war on your enemy's terms. You never fight on their terrain, and you never fight when they choose. You let them build their monument. You let them announce their victory, and you wait for them to overextend. Madeline walked to the window, looking out at the Tetons, sharp and unforgiving in the twilight. He thinks I'm an old woman grieving her daughter's broken marriage. He thinks I'm a CEO, too busy with aura tech to bother with a small-time con man. He has forgotten who I am. She turned back to her daughter. The $100 million from the Legacy Trust. It was bait. I wanted him to have it. I wanted him to be rich, arrogant, and most importantly, distracted. Distracted from what? From me, Madeline said simply. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a file. Arthur Kincaid has been busy. While Mr. Russo has been posing for magazines, we have been digging. She laid out a series of key corporate structures. Nautilus Holdings, the company he used to frame you. He was clever. He routed the money through 3 different jurisdictions. Cayman, then Cyprus, then to a bank in Zurich. We know this, Serafina said, impatient. It's a dead end. The account is empty. He used it all as his money to get the West Third deal. He thought it was a dead end, Madeline corrected, but he made a mistake. He got sloppy. He used the same incorporation lawyer in Zurich to set up Nautilus that he had used 3 years ago for... What was it? She consulted a paper. Ah, yes, a shell company called Apex Global. All it ever did was receive 1 wire transfer for $50 an email from an Apex Global account. The recipient, Bianca Wells. The subject line, Phase 1, complete. The date 3 days before the Nautilus transfers began. Serafina's breath hitched. What is this? This, Madeline said, is where the hunt really begins. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to frame you. This was a plan, a conspiracy. Apex Global was his war chest. And he and Bianca Wells planned the entire divorce, including the whistleblower narrative, months before he ever stormed out of our dining room. But how did you find this? Dante is a creature of habit. He thinks he's a wolf, but he's just a fox. He always goes back to the same hole, the Zurich lawyer. We didn't just investigate Dante. We investigated everyone he ever spoke to. Bianca Wells, his new investors. Madeline smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator that has just smelled blood in the air. And who? Serafina asked, her voice a whisper. Our West Third capital. Ah, Madeline said. That is the most interesting part. They're a PE firm, very aggressive, very new, and according to their SEC filing, their primary limited partner, the source of 90% of their operating capital, is a holding company based in Luxembourg. And the name of that holding company, Madeline said, tapping the final document, is Patagonia Equity. I've never heard of them. You have, Madeline said. It's the private experimental investment arm of Auratech Global. It's my company. Serafina stared, comprehension dawning like a cold, bright sunrise. You. Dante Russo didn't walk into a meeting with West Third Capital, Madeline explained. He walked into a trap I had been setting for 6 months. I own his investors. I own his seed money. I own him. But the 75 million, you gave it to him. He's paying for his own launch party, Serafina. He's using my money to build his store, my money to hire his PR girl, my money to buy his stupid McLaren. Every receipt he signs, every check he cuts, is just another nail in his own coffin. Serafina sank into a chair. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. It was total. He thinks he's a mogul. Madeline continued, but he's just a middle manager in a company of one, and I am the CEO, the launch party. That's his performance review, and I'm afraid he's not going to get a good one. What happens now? Now? Madeline snapped her briefcase shut. You get on a plane. You're going to Peru. That water treatment facility you were building, the one he tried to sabotage, it's opening. I want you at the ribbon cutting. I want you to be photographed doing your work. Be the woman he tried to erase. And you, I, said Madeline Hayes, am going to New York. I have a statement to prepare. The long, cold silence was over. The hunt had ended. The execution was about to begin. The night of the Rue Esso flagship launch was electric. A cold November rain lashed the streets of Soho, but inside it was a different climate. The 10,000 square foot space was packed a sweltering, humid jungle of perfume, champagne, and ambition. The black marble floors gleamed. The smoked glass walls reflected the pulsing lights. And the giant 4K video wall behind the main stage played a hypnotic loop of Dante himself. Dante on a speedboat, Dante in a bespoke suit, Dante laughing with a beautiful woman, all intercut with the stylized R logo. Bianca Wells, in a silver sequined gown, stood near the door, air-kissing Vogue editors and whispering in the ears of Times columnists. "Isn't it divine?" she trilled. "He built this all himself, from nothing, a true visionary." The champagne was Bollinger, not the pedestrian verve he once drank. The hors d'oeuvres were passed by models, not waiters. Every detail was designed to scream unapologetic luxury. And at the center of it all was Dante. He was magnificent. He wore a custom white Tom Ford suit, a stark, angelic contrast to the store's dark palace aesthetic. He hadn't just arrived, he had descended. He moved through the crowd, a god among mortals. Every camera flash was a prayer. Every fawning compliment was a hymn. He saw Irina and Katya, the models from St. Bart's, and blew them a kiss. He saw the CEO of West Third Capital, a man named Mr. Peterson, who was in reality a high-level employee of Aura Tech's financial division, and clapped him on the shoulder. "We did it. Peterson," Dante boomed over the music. "The new kings of New York, all you Mr. Russo." Peterson smiled a perfectly neutral corporate smile. At 9:00 p.m., Bianca Wells tapped a microphone. The music dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man you've all been waiting for, the creative force, the visionary, the mogul, Dante Russo." The crowd erupted. Dante strode onto the low stage, taking the microphone. He was bathed in a single, brilliant, white spotlight. He looked out at the sea of faces at the cameras, at the entire world that was here to worship him. He felt a surge of power, so pure, so absolute, that he almost laughed. He had won. He had won. Wow. He breathed into the mic, a perfect imitation of humility. He waited for the applause to die down. "Thank you. Thank you so much. What a night." He paused, looking up, as if gathering his thoughts. This was the speech he had been rehearsing in his head for 6 months. "They said I was just a face." He began, his voice a low, velvety purr. "They said I was just a kept man, a decoration." A sympathetic awe rippled through the front row. "They said I didn't have a thought in my head, that I didn't have a voice. They tried to put me in a gilded cage." He shook his head, a small, sad smile playing on his perfect lips. "But a cage, even a gilded one, is still a cage. But look around," he said, his voice rising, gesturing to the opulent store. "This is my empire. This is my vision. This was built on my back. With my integrity." He was high on his own supply, feeding off the energy, the flashes, the pure, uncut adoration. "No one can take this from me," he declared, his voice ringing with triumph. "Tonight we celebrate not just a brand. We celebrate freedom. We celebrate authenticity. We celebrate me." He raised his hand, gesturing for his glass of champagne, ready for the toast. "So I say, to Russo." And as he said the name, as the word Russo left his lips, the giant 4K screens behind him, the ones playing his own beautiful face, flickered. The audio in the room cut. The pulsing music, the chatter, all of it gone. A high-pitched feedback whine screeched for a single agonizing second. Dante flinched, annoyed. A technical glitch on his night. "Paolo!" He snapped into the darkness at his tech guy. The screens went black. The store was plunged into a disorienting spotlight and shadow silence. The crowd murmured confused. And then the screens lit up again. But it wasn't Dante's face. It was Madeline Hayes. She was not in a studio. She was in her office at Aura Tech, the one with the panoramic view of the city. She wore a simple navy blue dress. No jewelry, save for a small practical watch. She looked directly into the camera, not with anger, but with the profound, tired disinterest of a CEO about to liquidate a failed asset. Dante froze. His hand holding the microphone hung limply at his side. This was not a live feed. It was a pre-produced statement released simultaneously as phones in the audience began to buzz to Bloomberg, Reuters, the Wall Street Journal, and every major news network on Earth. "Good evening." Madeline's voice filled the store, clinically clear and cold. "For those of you attending the launch of the RUSSO brand, I offer a correction." The crowd was utterly silent. Bianca Wells was staring, her face a mask of horror. "Mr. Russo speaks of his vision, his empire. Let's clarify its origins." Dante's heart began a low, painful drumbeat against his ribs. This wasn't possible. She wouldn't. "The victory. First," Madeline continued, "the $100 million settlement Mr. Russo boasts of. He has painted this as a victory over my family, a testament to his negotiating skill. The truth is simpler." On the screen, a document appeared, a wire transfer confirmation from a legacy trust. This was a disbursement from a trust my late father established, a trust which by its own bylaws I am legally barred from contesting. It was not a settlement. It was a scheduled distribution. It was in essence an expensive but necessary pest removal fee. A collective gasp. Dante felt the blood drain from his face. Pest. The whistleblower. Second. Madeline said, the narrative of Mr. Russo as a whistleblower. The claim that he left his wife upon discovering financial impropriety in her philanthropic foundation. A new document appeared, a bank record from Nautilus Holdings. This is the shell company Mr. Russo discovered. He was right to be alarmed. It was being used for fraud, because he was the one committing it. A timeline flashed on screen. January 10th. Dante Russo meets with Bianca Wells. Apex Global account is activated. January 14th. Bianca Wells receives a $54,000 consulting wire from Apex. February 1 to 5th. Dante Russo presents routine tax forms to his wife. February 7th. The first of 3 illegal wire transfers totaling $12 million is moved from the Serafina Foundation to Nautilus Holdings using the signatures he fraudulently obtained. March 20th. Dante discovers the fraud and demands a divorce. He did not leave because of the fraud, Madeline stated, her voice slicing through the air. The fraud was the pretext for his leaving. It was a meticulously planned 6-month campaign of embezzlement and character assassination, designed for a single purpose: to extort a 9-figure settlement. Dante was no longer breathing. He was a statue carved from ice. "He's lying," a woman shouted from the crowd. It was Bianca Wells, her PR instincts on autopilot. "This is slander. This is the Empire. Third," Madeline Hayes continued, as if Bianca hadn't spoken. "The Russo brand itself. Mr. Russo has claimed he built this from nothing." A new set of logos appeared on the screen. West Third Capital, Patagonia Equity. Mr. Russo secured $75 million in seed capital from an investment firm called West Third Capital, a firm, he was told, whose primary limited partner was Patagonia Equity. Madeline leaned forward slightly. This was the killing blow. Patagonia Equity is a wholly owned subsidiary of Aura Tech Global. It is my personal holding company. Mr. Russo, Dante, has not been building his empire for the last 6 months. He has been building mine. Dante's knees buckled. He grabbed the microphone stand to steady himself. No. Peterson. He looked wildly for the investor, but Peterson was already gone. "I have been for the last 180 days the sole investor, primary creditor, and silent owner of Russo. I funded his store. I paid for his models. I own the lease on this building. I even, through a third party, paid for the very champagne you are drinking tonight." A man in the front row looked at his glass of Bollinger and set it down on a tray as if it were poison. "The execution. Mr. Russo made a single critical error," Madeline concluded. "He believed that because my daughter was kind, she was weak, and that because I was silent, I was absent." The image on screen changed. It was no longer Madeline. It was the granite steps of the New York County District Attorney's office. As of 9:00 p.m. Eastern, Madeline's voiceover continued, "A full criminal complaint with all accompanying evidence has been filed with the DA's office for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement which Mr. Russo thought he had invalidated contains a standard morality clause. But it also contains a fraud clause. Any act of fraud committed against Ms. Hayes or her interests voids all settlement payments present and future." The $100 million settlement was gone. "And finally," she said, "as the sole owner of Russo, I am effective immediately dissolving the brand, terminating all associated employment, and voiding the lease on this property. The company is bankrupt. The empire is closed." Madeline's face reappeared. She looked for the first time directly at Dante, as if she could see him through the lens. "Enjoy the party, Dante," she said. "It's the last one you'll ever have that you didn't steal." The screens went black. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the $20 million store was the hiss of the air conditioning. Dante Russo stood on the stage, a ghost in a white suit. The spotlight was still on him, but it no longer illuminated. It interrogated. Then the first phone. A New York Times push alert. Breaking Madeline Hayes dissolves Russo. Brand accuses founder Dante Russo of multi-million-dollar fraud. Every head in the room bent down, their faces lit by the blue glow of their screens. They read. They looked up at Dante. They read again. There was no anger, no shouting, just the cold, final judgment of the elite. He was no longer a mogul. He was no longer a man. He was a story. A bad one. Bianca Wells was the first to move. She didn't run. She gathered her clutch, smoothed her dress, and walked calmly toward the exit, already dictating a text to her lawyer. The Vogue editor followed. Then the Times columnist. Then the celebrities, their security details, parting the crowd. Within 3 minutes, the coronation had become a crime scene. Dante was left alone on the stage. The models who had been passing hors d'oeuvres had vanished, their trays abandoned. The only people left were a few bewildered tech guys and a Page 6 photographer who was snapping pictures with a rabid intensity. Click, flash, click, flash. The flashes caught the single tear that rolled down Dante's cheek, a perfect crystalline drop of despair. It caught the moment he finally completely understood. He hadn't been defeated. He had been allowed. His victory wasn't a victory. It was a leash. And Madeline Hayes had just in front of the entire world given it a final neck-snapping yank. He looked at the R logo above the bar. It flickered, and then one by one the lights that formed the letters went out, plunging the store and his life into a total unrecoverable darkness. The aftermath was not a fire. It was a glacier, slow, silent, and absolute. Dante did not walk out of the Soho store. He was escorted. By 10:00 p.m., 2 stone-faced detectives from the DA's white-collar crime unit were waiting for him by the service exit. The Page 6 photographer got the money shot. Dante Russo, his perfect white Tom Ford suit, now splattered with rain, his hands cuffed behind his back, being guided into the back of an unmarked police car. The headline the next morning was simple: shattered. The legal case was a formality. The evidence Madeline had provided was so comprehensive, so meticulously documented, that Dante's lawyers, the same ones who had celebrated the $100 million settlement, advised him to take a plea. The Apex Global emails to Bianca Wells proved conspiracy and intent. The Nautilus wire transfers, cross-referenced with the forms Serafina had signed, proved the fraud. Bianca Wells, in a stunning act of self-preservation, turned state's evidence. She gave the DA everything: voicemails, texts, her own war room notes, in exchange for immunity. Her career in PR was over, but she would not go to jail. Dante had no such protection. He was charged with 3 counts of wire fraud, 1 count of conspiracy, and 1 count of aggravated embezzlement. He pled guilty to all charges. His sentencing was 6 months later. The courtroom was quiet. He wore an off-the-rack suit that hung on his now thin frame. The charisma was gone. The magic was gone. He was just a tired, hollowed-out man. The judge was not kind. "Mr. Russo, you conducted a campaign of calculated cruelty, financial and emotional, against a person whose only crime was to trust you. You disguised theft as romance. This was not a crime of passion. This was a business plan. You are sentenced to 7 to 10 years in a state correctional facility. Dante didn't even flinch. He was already gone. The $100 million pest removal fee was of course clawed back by the state, as were the proceeds from the sale of his McLaren and the Soho loft. He was left with nothing. Less than nothing. He was left with a debt to society he could only pay with time. The Rosso store was liquidated. The black marble was ripped out, the 4K screens sold for scrap. A trendy athleisure brand took over the lease 6 months later. And Serafina. She was not in the courtroom. She was not in New York. On the night of the launch party, she had been as her mother instructed in Peru. She was standing on a different kind of stage, a simple wooden platform in a small, dusty village. She was cutting a blue ribbon, officially opening the Luz del Agua treatment facility. The photos that went out on the wire were a stunning contrast to Dante's. There were no celebrities, no champagne, just Serafina, her hair in a practical braid, smiling a real, genuine smile as a small child drank the first cup of clean, safe water from the new tap. When the news of Dante's arrest broke, her phone lit up. She turned it off. She spent the next 3 days hiking in the Andes, visiting other potential sites, doing the work. When she returned, she did not move back into the Fifth Avenue penthouse. She moved into a modest, by Hayes standards, apartment downtown. She took over the Serafina Foundation, not just as its benefactor, but as its CEO. Her first act was a complete audit. Her second was to install a new board. Her third was to have a very quiet, very firm lunch with her mother. "I am grateful," Serafina told Madeline, "for what you did. You protected me. You protected the family." "It was," Madeline said, "a necessary business decision." "It was," Serafina countered, "a maternal act of war, and I love you for it. But it ends now." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "Oratech will no longer have a seat on my board," Serafina said. "And your CFO will no longer be co-signing my accounts. The foundation is mine. The work is mine. And my mistakes will be mine." Madeline Hayes looked at her daughter. The wallflower was gone. The mouse was gone. Sitting across from her was a woman who had been forged in a crucible of betrayal and had come out steel. "I respect that," Madeline said, and for the first time she wasn't speaking as a mother to a child or a CEO to an heir. She was speaking as an equal. Serafina Hayes became a force. She leveraged her name not as a brand, but as a weapon for good. She became one of the most effective no-nonsense philanthropists of her generation. She never spoke of Dante. She never had to. Her life was the only statement that mattered. Dante Russo became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Where are they now? Article waiting to be written. He was a face, and then he was a name, and then he was just nothing. A failed asset, liquidated and forgotten, while the empire he tried to con, the empire he tried to ruin, just kept on stronger than ever. The story of Dante Russo is a brutal reminder that a public victory is not the same as a private win. He had all the flash, all the charisma, and all the headlines. He won the media war, but he lost the real one. He forgot that in the world of real power, the loudest person in the room is almost always the weakest. He thought he was playing chess, but Madeline Hayes was playing an entirely different game, one where she owned the board, all the pieces, and the clock. He flaunted his $100 million prize, not realizing it was just bait in a trap that had been set long before he even knew he was prey. It's a chilling real-life drama about the difference between image and power, between noise and strategy. What do you think? Was Madeline's revenge a masterstroke of justice or a cold-blooded corporate execution? If you were gripped by this story of ambition, betrayal, and ultimate takedown, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a story where the mighty don't just fall, they're pushed. Be sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell because I have so many more stories like this to share. Thank you for watching. The winter wind bit through her threadbare coat, but Sarah Donovan barely noticed. Strolling past neon-lit windows, she couldn't ignore the relentless ache in her belly, an ache caused by hunger and the 6-month child she carried. Shivering on the sidewalk, she glanced up at a massive TV screen, blaring the nightly financial news. There, beaming under the bright studio lights, was a man she once promised to love forever. William Donovan, her husband, a multimillionaire, famous, admired, while she trembled in the cold. Her heart twisted. How had their world turned so cruel? She had nothing, and he seemed to have it all. Sarah Donovan had known hunger before, but never like this. On that frigid evening, the wind seemed to slice through layers of her clothing directly into her bones. She pulled the sides of her coat together in a desperate attempt to keep warm. Through the swirling snowflakes, she could just make out the bright flashing monitors in Times Square. On the largest screen, a familiar face, William Donovan, appeared. His name scrolled in large letters. Tech Investor of the Year. Applause thundered behind him in the recorded clip. Brightly lit, he was addressing a hall filled with wealth power and cameras from CNN, CNBC, and local networks. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes away. That face, the strong jaw, the slight smile that once reassured her everything would be all right. Now he looked polished, exuding confidence. She hadn't seen him in person for almost a year. Her chest clenched with memories of the day he walked out, arguments about money and ambition overshadowing their love. She'd tried to reason with him to support him, but each conversation ended in a new fight, culminating in the shocking decision he would succeed alone. The flickering billboard cut to a montage of images, William shaking hands with Mark Cuban at a tech conference, then introducing a pioneering piece of software in Silicon Valley. Sarah saw glimpses of glamorous parties William in a tailored tuxedo, accompanied by men and women she had never met. The talk show host concluded the segment by proclaiming, "William Donovan, America's newest business sensation." Then the screen blinked to a car commercial. Just like that, he vanished into the night. Sarah blinked back tears. There was a time William's arms had been her warm refuge, promising they'd face every storm side by side. And now, pregnant with his child, she walked alone on icy sidewalks, scrounging for a place to sleep. She was determined not to cry, but her emotions overwhelmed her as she gazed up at the ironically beautiful Christmas lights decorating the city. By all appearances, the world around her was celebrating, and she was surviving. Barely. She pressed a hand against her abdomen, feeling the slightest kick. "I'll take care of you," she whispered to the life inside her. It was a promise she intended to keep, though at that moment she wasn't sure how. When she turned away from the screen and stumbled onward, her foot snagged on a piece of broken pavement. A stinging pain shot through her ankle, and she nearly collapsed. She bit down a cry, scanning the crowd for help, but passers-by, preoccupied with their own rush of errands and holiday shopping, scarcely gave her a glance. That's what life had become after she left the small studio in which she and William once lived, alone, invisible. Sarah's pride was bruised, but she refused to crumble. She passed by a bakery. Through the window, the smell of fresh bread made her stomach twist. She had to preserve her last dollar for the cheapest motel, a place with peeling wallpaper and barely functioning plumbing, but at least it was indoors. She stepped inside, bought a small roll and devoured it in 3 bites. Outside again, the wind roared, intensifying the city's clamor. Still clutching her abdomen, she decided that tomorrow everything had to change. She would find a job. She'd scour the city for help. She would not let her child enter this world with nothing but sorrow. But for tonight, she needed a place to rest, a place that wasn't some abandoned corner or shadowed alley. Even if it cost her last few dollars, she had to prioritize the safety of the life inside her. As Sarah walked away from the mesmerizing screens of Times Square, one thought pulsed in her mind. Her husband, the man she had once loved beyond reason, was thriving. And here she was, pregnant and alone. Could the chasm between them grow any wider? Long before he was the darling of business magazines and tech summits, William Donovan was a daydreamer writing code in the corner of the local university library. Sarah remembered the first time she saw him. It was her sophomore year, and she was majoring in English literature at Columbia. The library's back table had been her favorite spot, quiet, perfect for reading. She noticed him, a junior in computer science, leaning over a laptop with an exasperated scowl. Curious and drawn by the intellectual frenzy in his eyes, she'd asked, "Need any help?" Although Sarah barely understood advanced programming, the question sparked the first real conversation they ever had. William's exhausted face broke into the shyest of smiles, and she recalled thinking, "He's kind of cute under all that stress." They chatted about his class project, an algorithm for data compression. Sarah confessed she was more comfortable discussing Shakespeare than software, and he teased her gently. From that moment on, they were a constant presence in each other's lives. Their connection seemed effortless. He awakened her interest in technology's potential. She introduced him to literary classics, weaving in metaphors about love and ambition. They started dating by Christmas break of that year, with sweet, simple moments, late-night walks around campus, scrounging for cheap coffee in the student lounge, trying out new ramen spots around Manhattan. They were 2 dreamers, William longing to found a tech startup that would revolutionize how people shared data, and Sarah hoping to become a novelist. The future seemed limitless. She could still feel the way he used to grasp her hand whenever she doubted herself, as if to say, "We'll get through anything." Yet as graduation approached, financial stresses haunted them. William, determined to compete in the tech world, pitched his software to small investors, but faced constant rejection. Sarah, meanwhile, struggled to get traction for her short stories, or even land a decent internship. Their families offered little financial support. William's parents, proud owners of a modest real estate business in upstate New York, expected him to follow a more traditional path and often expressed skepticism toward his entrepreneurial obsession. Sarah's mother, whose chronic illness drained the family's savings, couldn't help beyond a few encouraging phone calls. When they got married in a humble civil ceremony right after graduation, they were brimming with hope. Their honeymoon was a short weekend, spent in a budget motel near Niagara Falls, the only getaway they could afford. But they didn't care. What mattered was their shared devotion. They returned to New York City, renting a cheap studio apartment in Queens. William coded into the late hours, while Sarah worked as a barista by day and scribbled short stories by night. Their love burned like a bright flame until cracks began to form. William became consumed with success, obsessed, really. Each failed pitch to an investor sent him into a silent downward spiral that led to outbursts. Sarah tried to reassure him that failure was part of the journey, but her optimism only irritated him. As months dragged on, the bills piled up. William grew desperate, dabbling in risky deals with shady angel investors. They had endless arguments about money. When success finally arrived nearly 2 years into their marriage, with a major investor, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, buying into William's new software idea, Sarah hoped that would ease the tension. But ironically, it only magnified their differences. William was suddenly thrust into corporate meetings, traveling across the country, networking with high-profile entrepreneurs. Invitations to flashy events replaced their quiet dinners. He no longer came home with cheap takeout. He was gone most nights, presumably in boardrooms or at fancy parties. Sarah felt him slipping away. A year passed in that swirl of success, and Sarah was left behind, often alone, in their now upscale condo near Central Park. William's time was devoured by business calls and conferences on the West Coast. When he was home, he was distracted, fidgety, unwilling to share stories of his day. She remembered their final argument vividly. She'd asked him to spend one evening with her to reconnect. He retorted that she had no clue how hard he worked to keep them afloat, how she should be more grateful. That night ended with William storming out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. He never came back. Days became weeks. Sarah's calls and texts went unanswered. Soon bank notices arrived explaining how William had switched all joint accounts to his name alone. Sarah had no income. Worse yet, 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. Fear overrode any bitterness, but desperation set in. Rent soared, her barista job didn't pay enough, and she could no longer afford the condo. Before long, she was forced onto the street. She tried contacting William's PR office, but the line always went to a polite assistant who left her on hold until she hung up in frustration. Now, witnessing his face on the giant screen in Times Square, that entire whirlwind of a past threatened to engulf her. She reminded herself of one vow she'd made, standing in that battered apartment with an eviction notice in hand. I will survive and protect this child. If the father refused to care, she would find a way. She would not become just another nameless tragedy in the city's underbelly. Morning brought little relief from the cold. Sarah woke on a narrow, squeaky bed in the cheapest motel she could find. The heater rattled uselessly, barely keeping the air above freezing. She had about $15 left, enough for a couple of cheap sandwiches, maybe bus fare if she wanted to head to the next shelter. But Sarah was stubborn. She believed there had to be something better. She packed her meager belongings, a change of clothes, her worn copy of Emily Dickinson's poems, a phone with a cracked screen that almost never picked up a signal. Everything fit into a single bag. Every step outside felt like walking through a wind tunnel. She knew she had to find help soon. A pregnant woman living on the streets was a tragedy waiting to happen. She headed to the nearest public library, an older building with classical columns, seeking warmth and free internet to look for job openings. Inside, near the community bulletin board, she found a flyer advertising a free women's shelter in Brooklyn. It promised hot meals counseling and prenatal support. She tore off the address tab. This might be my best chance, she thought, shoulders relaxing slightly for the first time in days. She hopped on a bus, ignoring the pitying looks from a couple of other passengers. Upon arrival, she found the shelter nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The building was large, with peeling paint and sagging steps, but the warmth she felt when she walked inside was immediate and comforting. A friendly volunteer named Rebecca greeted her with a kind smile. After scribbling her name on a form, Sarah was shown to a cramped but clean room shared with 3 other women. Each cot had fresh blankets and a small side table. Meals are served at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening, Rebecca explained. We also have prenatal checkups every Friday with a visiting nurse from Bellevue Hospital. Sarah nearly cried with relief. A medical checkup was a blessing. She hadn't seen a doctor since learning of her pregnancy. Rebecca chatted with her for a while, asking about her situation. Though Sarah felt hesitant to reveal too much, there was something about Rebecca's gentle nature that encouraged honesty. She admitted her husband had left, that he was well off, and that she had nowhere else to go. Rebecca listened, never judging, then simply patted Sarah's shoulder. You'll be safe here. You'll get back on your feet. I'm here if you need anything, Rebecca offered. Those words of encouragement did more for Sarah's spirit than anything had in months. That first night in the shelter, Sarah lay in the dark, hearing the muffled snores of her roommates. She felt a faint flutter within her baby moving. I'm not alone, she reminded herself. This life inside her gave her purpose. She recalled an old Emily Dickinson line. She loved something about hope being a thing with feathers. That hope had perched in her soul, refusing to abandon her even in life's darkest corners. The next morning she joined the breakfast queue. The food wasn't luxurious oatmeal, a banana-powdered orange juice, but it was warm and nourishing. Some of the residents eyed her suspiciously. They were all at different points in life's struggles, yet in their gazes, Sarah sensed a silent camaraderie that had been missing in her life for so long. As she sat down to eat, Rebecca joined her. We have a job support program, Rebecca said, her voice quiet. You'd get help writing a resume, searching for openings, maybe training. I know it can be tough to find something with no stable address, but we can try. Sarah nodded eagerly. That would be great, she replied, swallowing a surge of gratitude. She was ready to do anything office cleaning retail, anything that would help her earn enough for a deposit on a small apartment. But as she scrolled through job listings later that day, a rerun of a business show played on the shelter's TV in the lounge. They were discussing William Donovan again. A celebrity investor, Mark Cuban, had praised William's entrepreneurial drive, suggesting he was the future of American tech. Hearing the news anchor casually mention her husband's name felt like a punch to the gut. He was more successful than she'd even imagined. She took a deep breath, forced herself to look away from the screen and told herself, this is my life now, and I'm not giving up. She wasn't sure if she hated him, missed him, or simply wished none of this had happened. All she knew was that she had to survive, and she would on her own terms. At precisely 9 in the morning the following Friday, Sarah waited in a makeshift exam room set up in the shelter's converted rec hall. Worn curtains partitioned the space. The volunteer nurse, Ms. Francis, bustled in, setting down a bag of medical supplies. She was a short, no-nonsense woman with bright, reassuring eyes. How are you feeling, dear? Ms. Francis asked, washing her hands and snapping on latex gloves. Sarah hesitated. She had been ignoring the dull ache in her lower back, the bouts of nausea that still came and went, and the constant exhaustion. Better now that I have a safe place to sleep, she admitted. Ms. Francis nodded, taking Sarah's vitals, measuring her belly, and listening carefully with a Doppler for the baby's heartbeat. The rhythmic whoosh whoosh filled the air, and Sarah's eyes grew misty. This was the first time she'd heard her child's heartbeat. So strong, she thought, pressing a hand to her mouth. No major concerns right now, Ms. Francis informed, giving a small smile. But you need to be mindful of your diet. Get as much protein and healthy foods as you can. And rest. Stress can harm the baby too. Sarah almost laughed bitterly. Stress was the only thing she had in abundance. But she forced a bright nod. Ms. Francis noted that Sarah would need a formal medical file at a hospital soon in case of early labor or complications. We'll coordinate that, Ms. Francis added. In the meantime, do you have any support person for prenatal care? A family member or... Her voice trailed. My husband's. Not around, Sarah said, swallowing a lump in her throat. No other family in the city. The nurse's expression turned sympathetic. Well, you're not alone. We're here to help. After the checkup, Sarah felt slightly more confident. The baby was healthy. That knowledge was the anchor she clung to. She spent her afternoons in the job support program, brushing up her typing skills, practicing interview responses with a counselor named Janet. Her English degree helped. She applied for positions as a receptionist, an editorial assistant, or even a part-time tutor. Most responses came back negative. Employers didn't want someone with an unstable address, or they required advanced certifications. But Sarah persevered. Days turned into weeks. The bulge in her belly became more pronounced, and so did the heaviness in her heart. She tried to keep track of the outside world, scanning newspapers in the library for job ads, occasionally glimpsing headlines about William Donovan's skyrocketing success. One day the paper featured a photograph of him leaving a high-end restaurant with a tall, elegant woman wearing designer clothes. The photo caption labeled her as Madeline Ashford, potential new business partner. Sarah's throat tightened. She glanced at her own reflection in the library window. Rumpled coat eyes ringed with fatigue. If William had moved on personally, was she even a memory? That evening her back pains grew sharper, and she realized with dread that her pregnancy was entering a stage where she would soon need consistent medical care. She couldn't keep skipping checkups or rely solely on the shelter nurse. She also worried about finances, diapers, baby clothes, a crib. Where would she get them? She'd joined a waiting list for government assistance, but bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. Sarah found herself weeping some nights, the future an ominous shadow. Yet each morning she recalled the baby's heartbeat, reminding herself there was no choice but forward. One particularly cold day, she forced herself to walk 3 miles in the slushy streets to follow up on a potential receptionist position. She arrived soaked and shivering. Her hopes rose when the manager, a kindly older woman, offered a temporary role answering phones at a small publishing company. The pay was minimal, but it was something. She'd start Monday. Sarah left the office hugging a folder of paperwork and feeling a glimmer of pride. I'm making progress. When she returned to the shelter, though, she found Rebecca pale-faced in the hallway. We need to talk, Rebecca said quietly, leading Sarah to a corner. Apparently an acquaintance of Sarah's had come by looking for her, a man with slicked-back hair and an expensive suit. He left a business card that read, Donovan Enterprises. Sarah's heart hammered. She stared at the card, the swirling black and gold letters. Did he say anything she managed to ask? Just that he needed to speak with you regarding a personal matter. Sarah's mind whirled. Could it be William's lawyer? One of his personal aides? Did William know she was pregnant? She never thought he would actually search for her. A swirl of anger, fear, and a strange residual hope filled her. She resolved to call the number. Maybe it was finally time for a confrontation, a reckoning. She just didn't know what to expect. Sarah picked up a battered pay-as-you-go phone, a small victory from the shelter's resource program, and stared at the business card. It bore a name: Charles Whitmore, Legal Counsel. She dialed with trembling fingers, listening to the ring on the other end. Anxiety swelled. Finally, a crisp male voice answered. Charles Whitmore speaking. This is Sarah Donovan. You left your card at the shelter. Her voice sounded small. He cleared his throat. Ah, Mrs. Donovan. I'm glad you reached out. Mr. Donovan, your husband would like to set up a meeting. It's in regard to finances and certain changes to his estate. A chill ran down her spine. Was this about a divorce? She almost panicked at the thought, but she maintained composure. Why now? She asked. The question came out bitterly. Ma'am, I only have instructions to coordinate your meeting. Could you come by the Donovan Enterprises office downtown on Fifth Avenue? Sarah hesitated. I can't. Not immediately. She had a job orientation. Soon she had no decent clothes and no money for a taxi. Shall we say next Tuesday at noon? He pressed. We'd be happy to reimburse your transportation. Mr. Donovan understands how difficult the city can be. He specifically requested you meet in a neutral setting. Sarah's anger flared at the paternalistic tone. But caution prevailed. All right. Tuesday. She hung up, heart thudding. William wants to meet. Part of her raged that he would drag her into some legal affair after all this time. Another part, small yet insistent, felt relief that maybe he would acknowledge their baby. Maybe do the right thing. And at least provide child support. Tuesday came quickly, and Sarah found herself rummaging through the shelter's donated clothing closet, picking out a modest black dress and a coat that fit snugly over her belly. Rebecca offered to do her hair in a simple bun. As she left, 6 women in the shelter wished her luck, though they knew only that she was meeting her ex. The Donovan Enterprises office towered over Fifth Avenue with mirrored glass windows. Sarah approached it anxiously, ignoring the doorman's raised eyebrow when she walked in. The marble-floored lobby gleamed, and well-dressed professionals hurried past, exuding an air of wealth. A statue of William's trademark D logo was on display near the elevators, a testament to his success. Charles Whitmore, a tall, slim man with graying hair, emerged from behind the reception area and greeted her with a polite bow. Mrs. Donovan. Right this way, he said, leading her to a plush conference room overlooking the city skyline. Soft leather chairs, a polished mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing Central Park. Everything screamed opulence. She perched on a chair, feeling out of place. Moments later, the door opened. In walked William Donovan. He wore a tailored charcoal suit and stepped forward with a hesitant smile. Sarah's throat constricted at the sight of him. He looked the same, yet different, older, more confident. She stood instinctively, placing a protective hand on her abdomen. If he noticed her rounded belly, he didn't show any immediate reaction. Sarah, he said quietly, as though testing the word. He paused, his eyes flicking to her stomach, then back to her face. Thank you for coming. I didn't realize you were, are you? She inhaled sharply. Pregnant, she finished. Yes. For nearly 6 months. A fleeting expression of shock, maybe guilt, flashed in his eyes. I didn't know, he said. You didn't tell me. Anger boiled in her. I tried. You cut all contact. You walked out. And her voice trembled. She clenched her fists. You were too busy with your empire to pick up the phone. He exhaled, looking pained. I'm sorry. I truly am. He sank into the chair opposite her, rubbing his temples. I messed up. I realize that now. I've been going through a lot, but it's no excuse. She eyed him warily, uncertain if this was genuine remorse or a performance. So why am I here? Did you need me to sign divorce papers? Is that it? William shook his head vigorously. No. That's not it at all. He looked at Charles, who stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mr. Donovan asked me to assist in drafting an arrangement to provide you with financial support, enough to cover all prenatal care, childbirth expenses, and living costs. In addition, there's a trust fund he'd like to establish for the child. Sarah felt a wave of conflicting emotions, relief that there was some practical solution, indignation that he thought money alone could fix everything, and a flicker of hope. What about us? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Our marriage? William gazed at her eyes, clouded. I want to help you. And our child. I know I can't change the past, but I can at least do right by you now. He hesitated, swallowing hard. As for us, Sarah, I can't pretend I haven't caused terrible damage. I don't expect you to forgive me instantly. But maybe with time, she wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like they were strangers. She realized she was trembling. He's acknowledging the child, she told herself. That was step one. Charles laid out documents referencing monthly allowances, coverage for medical bills, etc. The amounts were staggering. Sarah had never seen such figures. She could live comfortably, rent an apartment, and never worry about basic needs again. But guilt gnawed at her. Should she accept this? She eyed William, her voice wavering. Why now? She asked. Why not? Before William's face was taut. When I saw you disappeared from our condo and heard rumors you were struggling, I tried to locate you, but I was overwhelmed with expansions, new deals, then the pandemic of responsibilities. I kept putting it off. He inhaled, pained. That was wrong. I realized I couldn't move forward, knowing you might be suffering. You deserved better. Damn right I did, Sarah muttered, tears burning her eyes. She glanced at the legal documents. They were a band-aid solution. Maybe it was an answer for the baby. Yet a single question lingered. Could William Donovan possibly be part of my life again? She didn't sign anything that day, telling Charles she needed time to think. William offered to call her a car, but she declined, wanting to walk back to the shelter to clear her head. He handed her a card with his personal cell number, the only item that felt remotely intimate. She left the grand building uncertain whether she was stepping toward salvation or heartbreak. That evening, Sarah returned to the shelter in a daze. She found Rebecca in the kitchen, dishing out bowls of soup to the residents. Feeling the weight of the day pressing down on her, Sarah pulled Rebecca aside and recounted the surreal encounter with William Donovan. She showed her the paperwork, baffling sums of money that could turn her life around. That's... Wow, Rebecca breathed, flipping through the pages. I've never seen so many zeros on a support agreement. She paused. So what are you going to do? Sarah sighed, sinking into a chair. I don't know. Part of me feels like taking this money is the only logical choice. The baby deserves a stable life, not a mother stuck in a shelter. But another part, she rubbed her belly. I'm scared he's just trying to buy off his conscience. If I sign, do I lose my dignity? Rebecca placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. It's not about dignity, Sarah. It's about providing for your child and yourself. You've sacrificed so much. You deserve some security. That doesn't mean you have to let him back in your life unless you want to. Those words calmed Sarah slightly, but her mind remained unsettled. She recalled her once blazing love with William, how they'd giggle over cheap pizza late at night, how she'd fallen asleep on his shoulder while he read his code aloud. Is that man still in there, beneath the polished millionaire facade, she wondered. A part of her yearned for closure or even a chance at reconciliation. But the hurt was fresh, the betrayal still raw. The baby's well-being, however, was paramount. That same night, she carefully reviewed the documents, scribbling notes and questions in the margins, wanting to ensure she wasn't signing away any rights inadvertently. If William was sincere in his remorse, maybe she could start by accepting financial support, then see if anything else could be salvaged later. She set the papers aside, resolved to meet with Charles again in a few days. Meanwhile, Sarah's new part-time receptionist job started. She commuted by bus, then hopped the subway to a modest building in Midtown, stepping into the small publishing house. The environment was busy, yet casual stacks of manuscripts, coffee mugs on every desk, editors arguing about grammar. On her first day, she answered phones, directed visitors, and fetched coffee for staff meetings. By lunchtime, she was exhausted, but a gentle wave of triumph swelled inside her. I'm working. I'm making strides. During a brief break, she scrolled her phone and saw a new message from William. Please let me know if you have any questions about the agreement. Also, I hope you're doing well. That was all. So formal, yet tinged with a cautious warmth. Sarah stared at the screen, unsure how to reply, eventually typing a short, I'm still thinking. I'm safe. Thanks. She pressed send. Her heart hammered, but she forced herself to focus on her tasks. Over the following week, she gradually came to a decision. She agreed to sign the financial support arrangement, but made it clear to Charles Whitmore in an email that she didn't want William controlling her life. She insisted on having her own apartment in her own name, a modest but comfortable place near the shelter, so she could remain in the supportive environment until she felt truly stable. She also wanted the freedom to make medical and personal decisions for the baby. If William truly wanted to be involved, they could discuss visitation and co-parenting later. To her astonishment, William agreed to all of it, no arguments. He forwarded a preliminary lease for a small 2-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, the rent fully paid for a year. Sarah felt a surge of relief. He's taking responsibility, she thought. Maybe there was a shred of the old William left. But was she ready for more than just a transactional arrangement? Late one night, cradling the phone, she impulsively dialed his personal number. He picked up immediately, sounding anxious. Sarah. She swallowed. I just wanted to say thank you, she managed, for the help. Silence filled the line, then a soft exhale. Of course. It's the least I can do. Her voice trembled. This baby, William, it's ours. He or she deserves 2 parents who at least respect each other. He murmured, I'd like that. I'd like to earn your respect again. And maybe one day, your forgiveness. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She remembered how once, years ago, they could share entire nights, simply talking, dreaming. She had so many questions for him, why he abandoned her, what truly motivated his success, whether there was any love left. But for now, she whispered, Good night, William, and ended the call. By the time Sarah was entering her 7th month of pregnancy, her life looked drastically different. With William's financial support, she moved into the small but cozy apartment. The walls were painted a cheerful cream color, and there was an extra room she planned to turn into a nursery. The furniture was minimal, just a sofa, a bed, and a kitchen table, but it was hers. Her name was on the lease. Her job at the publishing house had also become slightly more secure. The manager recognized her punctuality and diligence. They offered her an extended contract for another 3 months. With the baby coming, Sarah wasn't sure how long she could keep working, but at least she had some sense of purpose each day. She'd found a routine that made her feel human again. Wake up, check on emails, go to work, come home. Set aside half an hour to jot down story ideas and then rest. She still visited the shelter occasionally, volunteering to help with new arrivals, offering them a spark of hope in the same way Rebecca had done for her. One chilly afternoon, Sarah heard a knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find William standing there, holding a small bouquet of lilies and a bag of groceries. Her heart pounded as she took in his hesitant smile. "I was in the neighborhood," he explained. "Thought I'd stop by, if that's okay." Sarah hesitated. She hadn't told him her exact address Charles must have. She had been careful with boundaries, not wanting to feel controlled, but she found herself nodding, stepping aside to let him in. He handed her the flowers, which she placed in a vase on the kitchen table. "I brought some things," he said, lifting the grocery bag. "Fresh fruit, vitamins, and a new jacket for you. The weather's getting colder." The gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she managed, smoothing her hand over her growing belly. His eyes flicked to the apartment, taking in the bare walls and modest furnishings. "It's nice, cozy," he remarked, trying to fill the silence. He glanced at her abdomen again, then back at her face. "May I ask, do you know the baby's gender?" She shook her head. "I want it to be a surprise," she said softly. "That's wonderful." William looked down, fiddling with the bag. Finally, he exhaled. "Sarah, I know showing up like this might be too forward. I'm trying to respect your space, but I'd also like to be more involved. I want to help with the doctor appointments, the nursery, anything you need." She studied him, noticing a sincerity in his gaze that hadn't been there during their last tumultuous months together. Why the sudden change, she asked. She recalled the humiliating nights she spent on the streets, clinging to her coat for warmth, while he mingled with venture capitalists. William's shoulders sagged. "When I left, I was consumed by my ambition, believing I couldn't handle a relationship. I was terrified of failing. I did fail you in the worst way. Then once success arrived, I felt emptier than ever. All I had was money, status, and a hollow sense of accomplishment." He paused, voice raw. "I realize now that none of it matters, without love, without people who truly care about you. I guess I'm trying to atone for that. I can't change the past, but I can try to be here now." Tears prickled Sarah's eyes. The sincerity in his voice shook her. "I appreciate the honesty," she said slowly. She wondered if it was real or if guilt simply propelled him now that she was visibly pregnant and vulnerable. Yet a part of her, the part that remembered how they'd once dreamed side by side, wanted to believe him. "Would you like some tea?" she offered, gesturing to the kettle on the stove. He nodded gratefully. The two of them settled at the tiny kitchen table, sipping tea amidst the silence. The city traffic hummed outside. Neither knew how to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage in one afternoon, but at least they were there, trying. After a while, William cleared his throat. "I'd like to take you to your next prenatal appointment," he said. "If you'll let me. I can drive or we can get a car. Whatever you prefer." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. "That would be nice." Deep down, a small flicker of warmth lit her heart, something akin to hope. William accompanied Sarah to her next prenatal appointment at Bellevue Hospital. Miss Francis, the shelter nurse who volunteered there, greeted them warmly, but Sarah noticed the curious glances from staff members. She imagined they recognized William. His face was plastered across business headlines. Yet to his credit, he didn't flaunt his status. He simply held Sarah's coat while she changed into a gown and asked the doctor thoughtful questions about the baby's development. They heard the baby's heartbeat again, steady and reassuring. William's expression softened, and Sarah saw tears in his eyes. A powerful wave of emotion struck her. It was the first tangible moment she realized he truly cared about the child. On their way out, he placed a gentle hand on her back, guiding her through the bustling hallway. She allowed the small gesture, longing for closeness, yet keeping her guard up. In the hospital lobby, they unexpectedly bumped into a familiar face, Barbara Donovan Williams' mother. Her short silver hair was styled elegantly, and she wore a designer coat. She froze upon spotting her son with Sarah. "William," she exclaimed. Then her gaze flicked to Sarah's round belly, and her eyes narrowed. "I heard rumors, but I thought you two were done." Sarah instinctively braced herself. She recalled the tension with her mother-in-law, who never quite warmed to her. Barbara had always found subtle ways to criticize Sarah's family background and modest means. She also blamed Sarah for distracting William from more important ambitions. William squared his shoulders. "Mother, this is Sarah. My wife. She's pregnant with our child." Barbara's lips pressed into a thin line. "So you're reconciling?" she asked, voice laced with disapproval. Sarah couldn't hold back. "I wouldn't call it that," she said quietly. "We're trying to figure things out, at least for the baby's sake." Barbara sniffed disdainfully. "William, you have far too many responsibilities to let old mistakes drag you down." She eyed Sarah as if she were an intruder. "Why didn't you tell him you were pregnant sooner?" A flame of anger rose in Sarah. "I tried. He left, and I had no way to reach him. And trust me, I wouldn't call carrying your grandchild a mistake." William gently took his mother's arm. "Enough, Mother. The baby is my responsibility, and I won't have you speak to Sarah that way. We're not discussing this here in a hospital lobby." Barbara sniffed again. "We'll talk later, William." She glared at Sarah with thinly veiled contempt, then turned on her heel and walked away. Heart-pounding, Sarah noticed people staring. She blinked back, tears, humiliated by the confrontation. William's jaw was tight. "I'm sorry. She had no right to talk to you like that," he said softly. But Sarah's mind raced. She recalled how Barbara had once told her she wasn't good enough for William, that he needed a partner more on his level. Now wealthy and successful, William's family clearly saw Sarah as an obstacle. "It's fine," she muttered, though her trembling hands said otherwise. "I'll manage." They walked outside, the crisp air hitting their faces. William turned to her. "Please don't let her get to you. She doesn't speak for me." Sarah found her resolve. "I won't. But if we're going to co-parent, I need to know you'll stand by me, not be swayed by your mother's opinions." He nodded, eyes earnest. "I promise." Though his promise felt genuine, Sarah couldn't ignore the chill left by the confrontation. She remembered the nights when William's mother belittled her for dreaming of being a writer, for lacking financial security. Would that negativity poison their child's life too? Or had William grown enough to shield his new family from it? Only time would tell. On the drive back to Sarah's apartment, the tension was palpable. William tried to make small talk about the baby's due date, about nursery decor, but Sarah was lost in her thoughts. In a rare moment of vulnerability, he admitted quietly, "My mother was always controlling. Part of why I left was because I felt suffocated by her expectations, by the pressure of success. I let that overshadow you and me. I'm sorry." Sarah clutched her seatbelt. "What's done is done," she said, voice steady. "Let's just focus on the future, on doing right by this baby. That's all that matters." Inside, though, her emotions churned. Could we really have a future together, she wondered? Or is it just going to be co-parenting with a man I once loved? At her apartment, he walked her to the door. "Call me if you need anything," he said softly. She nodded, uncertain if she'd ever be ready to let him fully back into her life. The final weeks of Sarah's pregnancy arrived with a swirl of conflicting emotions. Her belly felt enormous, every movement an effort. Sleep eluded her, replaced by a blend of excitement and anxiety about the impending birth. William visited regularly, bringing supplies, maternity clothes, organic food, baby items. They spoke about practicalities, pediatricians' childcare options, possible names. Yet the question of their relationship remained unresolved. At times, they fell into an unexpected closeness, sharing a laugh at a tiny onesie with silly prints reminiscing about their college days. In those moments, Sarah glimpsed the man she fell in love with, his eyes warm and tender. But the memory of abandonment always lurked. She couldn't easily forget sleeping on sidewalks, shivering in the winter cold, all while he soared to stardom. Trust would not be rebuilt overnight. One evening she typed away at a short story, her old passion for writing rekindling, when a gentle knock came at the door. She opened it to find William in casual clothes holding a large container of homemade soup. "You mentioned in passing that you craved chicken soup," he said, smiling sheepishly. "I asked my personal chef to make a batch." "Don't worry, I didn't cook it myself. That would be disastrous." Sarah's laughter slipped out before she could stop it. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He set the container down, noticing her manuscript drafts scattered across the table. "Are you writing again?" She blushed, nodding. "Just trying to get the creative juices flowing. Something for me, you know, to find myself again." He asked if he could read a snippet. She hesitated, then allowed him. He read quietly, eyes darting across the page. When he finished, he looked up, an admiring expression on his face. "This is really good," he said softly. "I forgot how talented you are." She swallowed, her heart fluttering. He was praising her, not dismissing her efforts as frivolous, like he once had. "Thank you," she whispered. They talked about the story about a lone traveler who finds hope in unexpected places. The conversation flowed naturally, reminiscent of their younger selves. At one point, he gently placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. A shared smile passed between them, something both tender and uncertain. Later that night, as he left, she lingered at the door. "William," she said softly, "I just want you to know. I see you trying. I appreciate it." He exhaled, relief washing over his face. "I'll keep trying, Sarah." But the next day, chaos returned. William called her in a panic, asking her to watch the news. Another business scandal had broken out, accusations that Donovan Enterprises engaged in questionable stock trading. Rumors swirled that William's mother, Barbara, had been pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating backdoor deals. William's name was splashed across headlines with tabloids, speculating about the moral integrity of his entire operation. Sarah flipped on her old TV set, seeing reporters swarm in front of Donovan Enterprises. A few sensationalist channels displayed a picture of Sarah from months ago, claiming she was the estranged wife carrying the heir to a troubled empire. She felt nauseous. Was she about to be dragged into the public eye? William texted, "I'm sorry. This is out of control. I never wanted you to be involved." She fought the urge to panic, but the stress weighed heavily, and within hours, mild contractions started. She was only 36 weeks along, a bit early, but still within a safe range. The contractions weren't severe yet, but she felt them enough to know her body might be preparing for labor. She called Miss Francis, who advised her to rest and hydrate, warning her to come to the hospital if things intensified. Night descended, and the tabloids kept spewing stories. A photo of Barbara, stern-faced, refused to speak to reporters. They insinuated that William's entire fortune could be at risk. Sarah tried not to care about money, but she worried about the baby. If Donovan Enterprises collapsed under scandal, would her child be caught in the crossfire of a messy public fiasco? When William arrived at her apartment, he looked drained, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm sorry for the media circus," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I had no idea my mother was involved in shady trades. I've fired the people responsible, but the damage is done." Sarah tried to remain calm, but the Braxton Hicks contractions flared, causing her to wince. William noticed immediately fear flashing across his features. "Are you okay? I think—" She paused, breathing through the discomfort. "I might be in early labor." His face paled, and in that moment, all talk of scandal and business melted away. "Let's get you to the hospital," he said gently, helping her gather her things. As they hurried out, Sarah realized a new chapter was beginning. Whatever storms raged outside, she was about to bring a child into the world, and she needed William's unwavering support. Inside the maternity wing at Bellevue Hospital, time seemed to slip into a blur of fluorescent lights, medical chatter, and waves of pain. Sarah was admitted with mild contractions that by midnight turned fierce. William stayed by her side, gripping her hand through each surge. Sweating and trembling, Sarah alternated between tears and focused breathing, clinging to the promise that soon she'd hold her baby. It was a tumultuous night. At one point, the baby's heart rate dipped slightly, prompting quick action from the medical staff. Fear stabbed through Sarah. She locked eyes with William, seeing raw terror reflected there. In that moment, all bitterness faded, replaced by the realization that they both desperately wanted their child to be safe. The baby's heartbeat stabilized, and relief flowed. Hours crawled by. Finally, near dawn, Sarah felt the overwhelming urge to push. Nurses coached her, encouraging her to bear down. She felt like every muscle in her body was on fire. William murmured supportive words, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. With a final guttural cry, she felt the release of pain and the sudden miraculous wail of new life. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up a tiny, squirming newborn. A rush of emotions seized Sarah. Love, relief, awe. She reached out trembling arms as they placed the baby on her chest. Shocked by the warmth of that tiny body, tears streamed down Sarah's face. William's eyes glistened too, a rare vulnerability she'd never seen in him before. "Welcome to the world," Sarah whispered. Voice choked, pressing a kiss to the baby's wet forehead. The little girl quieted, opening her eyes for a brief second, as if trying to focus on her mother's face. Later they moved Sarah to a recovery room. William remained close, pacing the hallway, on calls to his legal team, but always returning to check on Sarah and the baby. He smiled whenever he saw them together, as though the world outside, with all its scandal and drama, had lost its power here. Barbara tried to visit, but Sarah requested only William and the medical staff be allowed in. She wasn't ready to confront her mother-in-law. Not yet. Meanwhile, word arrived that the scandal at Donovan Enterprises was being resolved. William had stepped forward, taking responsibility for corporate oversight lapses and cooperating with regulators. He was determined to repair the damage rather than hide. 2 days passed in the hospital, a whirlwind of feeding diaper changes and exhausted naps. Sarah watched William hold their daughter, marveling at how gently he cradled her. They hadn't formally picked a name. Sarah had 6 favorites. While gazing into her daughter's round, curious eyes, she decided on Hope. It felt fitting. This tiny baby was the embodiment of new beginnings. When discharge day came, William insisted on driving them to Sarah's apartment. He carefully carried the car seat, setting it up by the living room couch. Sarah gently unbuckled Hope, lifting her close. For a moment, they stood together in the quiet apartment, the hush broken only by soft baby sighs. "I want to make a pledge," William said, voice low. "To be here for you and Hope, always. I know I can't erase the past, but I swear I'll do everything in my power to make our future better." Sarah gazed at him, then at Hope. Her heart brimmed with a kaleidoscope of emotions: uncertainty, gratitude, a cautious desire to heal. "It won't be easy," she murmured. "We have a lot to work through, but I'd like to try." He exhaled relief, flooding his features. "We'll go at your pace. Whatever you need." She nodded, tears glimmering. Over his shoulder, she saw a reflection in the window herself, William and Hope in his arms, forming a fragile family portrait. Perhaps fate had brought them full circle. The child they created now bound them with a love that neither betrayal nor success could sever. For weeks they navigated those uncharted waters. William balanced corporate responsibilities with fatherhood, often losing track of time as he admired his sleeping daughter. Sarah slowly let her guard down, recognizing that while forgiveness would be a journey, she didn't have to walk it alone anymore. Each day, she felt stronger. Each day, baby Hope grew a reminder that life could emerge triumphant, even from heartbreak. Whether or not Sarah and William's relationship would fully mend remained to be seen. But for the first time, she believed in second chances. In a world as unpredictable as theirs, one truth shone clear: love, when nurtured, can heal even the deepest wounds. And so, from the frigid sidewalks of homelessness to the gentle warmth of a newfound family, Sarah and William's story shows that life rarely unfolds as expected, but hope can spark miracles. Their journey reminds us that every hardship carries the seed of possibility, and every broken bond can mend with genuine remorse, forgiveness, and perseverance. Thank you for joining me in this emotional roller coaster of heartache, redemption, and rebirth. If this story moved you, if you felt Sarah's struggles and found inspiration in her resilience, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Your support ensures we can continue creating dramatic, heartfelt stories that spark conversations and spread hope. Comment below. What part of Sarah and William's journey resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts, and let's keep the conversation going. Together we celebrate love's power to heal no matter how broken the path once seemed.